above the city of Laredo, Texas, epicenter of the Biden-Harris border crisis.
But no, they don't stop them. So the people get lost into our country and they never get heard from again.
There's the border crisis, you know.
Along the Rio Grande, you can see border patrols coming to us.
Kamala's staging ground to import her army of migrant gangs and illegal alien criminals into every state.
America's immigration system has been broken for a long time.
And it's only getting worse.
Any migrants could be underneath the brush.
Just here through Port Laredo, you're getting $300 billion a year in trade coming into the United States.
Millions of dollars are lost. I'm standing in front of the World Trade Bridge here in Laredo, Texas, where 40% of all land-bound trade comes in and out of in the U.S. Of the 102 lanes for commercial trade along the southern border, the majority are here in the Laredo sector of Texas. We're here learning from Border Patrol how they're optimizing the system. For every minute of backup, whether due to traffic or system malfunctioning, millions of dollars are lost. And considering that Customs and Border Patrol is the second greatest generator of federal revenue after the IRS, those losses tend to add up. We're learning how they're trying to both modernize the system using radio frequency technology and also crack down on smuggling of international narcotics, corporate trade, and IP theft.
From the time a truck rolls up to the U.S. Customs checkpoint from the Mexican half of the World Trade Bridge until it continues on into the 100-degree sun of South Texas, only 27 seconds pass. Meanwhile, others can languish for hours to be screened by federal agents. However, lanes for free and secure trade for commercial vehicles with a FAST program act as sort of a TSA pre-check for the most frequent travelers of the 20,000 trucks driving the World Trade Bridge daily. Considering the bridge itself transports more value in trade than any other land port in the country, and Port Laredo is responsible for nearly half of all of our trade with Mexico, every second counts.
Daniel Covarrubias, for a long time, Canada was the U.S.'s top trade partner, and then China, and now, as of last year, it's finally Mexico. And Texas actually has a trade surplus with Mexico. And I think especially in the protectionist argument and the debate about our relationship with Mexico, that element is lost. The fact that the state of Texas does send out more exports than it does import.
It does, and like you said, it's the second time in the history that Mexico has been the top trading partner with the United States. But more importantly, it's the first time in history that Mexico has been the top importer to the United States and surpassing China. So I think that's the biggest point in this resurgence of Mexico, or drop in China's trade with the United States. So yes, Mexico, there's a lot of trade that goes through Texas and Mexico, particularly where we are at Port Laredo, right? 40% of trade between Mexico and the United States crosses through Laredo, Texas, right? And you got the opportunity to see the World Trade Bridge, to see what 16,000 trucks a day look like, 20,000 if you take both bridges that are in Laredo, Texas, World Trade Bridge and Columbia Bridge. So yes, I mean, it's a booming industry. A lot of car manufacturing, auto parts, electronics cross through the Port of Laredo. And it's the essence of this region of South Texas, and Texas has been booming. I mean, you see also how Texas economic prowess has been able to attract foreign direct investment, how Texas has been able to also bring corporations from other states in the United States too. It's more, I mean, they call it more pro-business, and you can see it in the numbers as you just stated.
And you coin in your book the term logistics. Can you describe that to me?
Well, it's a term that basically it's a play on words between logistics and technology, and it's what I use to be able to research the impact that exponential technologies are having on logistics, cross-border trade, supply chain processes, right? So basically, it's a three-step methodology that you analyze how technologies are creating greater efficiencies on the transportation side of trade, how they're creating cost reductions on the handling side of trade, and ultimately something that's very important for this region in which we're in this Port Laredo, how they create faster delivery of goods through the customs clearance process, right? So it's something that we saw today at the World Trade Bridge. technologies such as these non-intrusive inspection points that are giving greater security to the trade process, but at the same time they're creating greater efficiencies and making sure that trade is safe, secure, and fast.
And as we see, when you're transporting 20,000 trucks in one day, if you can shave off 5 seconds per time of screening, that's exponential in value over time.
It is.
Right now, the X-ray inspection is all done with the human eye. It will take an average of 1 minute and 16 seconds from the moment a scan is made till it's seen by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. AI is in its infancy stages, but like anything, an algorithm must be developed. CBP told us it could be 5 to 10 years before any kind of AI could be implemented in the X-ray scanning and inspection process.
U.S. Customs showed us today the early models of this non-invasive inspection technology where there's a stronger radio frequency form of measuring the front of a truck and then a higher level of radio frequency measuring for the back of the truck. And right now, it's only screening 20% of commercial vehicles on that Laredo bridge, but they're trying to get it up to 90% by October. Who exactly is paying for that?
Well, talking about logistics, that's a great example of it, right? That's a technology that's being implemented to create greater efficiencies, to create safer trade, and to facilitate the trade process, right? So who's paying for them? It's the federal government. I mean, CBP is under the Department of Homeland Security. It's the federal government funding these inspection points. And it's just like they're going to be funding other technologies because the goal is to make trade facilitation faster, more secure. So these non-invasive inspection points, like you say, they're X-rays machines through which now truck operators don't have to get down on the truck while the truck passes, right? So now you're getting 125 trucks passing through an hour passing through these inspection points, right? So like you just said, it has various levels of intensity regarding X-rays, and it's going to give CBP a lot more visibility. I mean, CBP's numbers on what they inspect are not public. So I mean, there's estimates of what they used to inspect on cargo, but Congress mandated that CBP by 2026, we were told, inspect 90% of cargo that comes through commercial bridges, right? So the best way to do it is through these non-invasive inspection points, which I think is a great technology to be able to do it. So one, it's going to give them a lot more visibility on what things are coming in through, because by the time the truck arrives at the checkpoint where the officer is going to have data on the truck driver because of his clearance documents and so on, and it's also going to have a picture of what's in the back of the truck. So security-wise, it's going to implement a lot of gains for CBP, and in the end, you can create those efficiencies through these type of technologies.
And what are they screening for? Because it turns out that CBP is the second largest revenue raiser for the federal government after the IRS. So what are they trying to find?
Well, it's not anything that crosses through trucks. So what you're right that they're the second revenue raiser behind the IRS because of the duties that they collect on the trade that's coming in. So you have to take into account that just here through Port Laredo, you're getting $300 billion a year in trade coming into the United States. So duties are collected on that trade, on those goods that are being imported and exported to the United States. And that's how CBP collects, is a revenue raiser for the United States. So what are they inspecting? Anything, right? You have to be able to see what's in the trucks. And it could be, I mean, you have to see the goods. They're talking about new technologies also to be able to compare manifests where you get the information of the goods that are in the truck to be able to have it on hand by the time you see the picture of what's actually in the truck. So these are specialists, right? So they're trained to look at these images, and they could screen for a lot of things, right? That could come in through commercial bridges.
At Lago del Rio, I'm standing next to this invasive species. It's the chorizo cane. It absorbs some 100 gallons of fresh water a day from the Rio Grande, which is pretty much the most important freshwater source for here in Laredo, Texas, and all of South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley. As you can see here at Lago del Rio, built by IBC Bank, they've cleared out a lot of this invasive species, including the chorizo cane, keeping an open lane down there that Border Patrol is able to access, and most importantly, that helicopters and cameras that are stationed around the perimeter are able to see if migrants make it across the Rio Grande, because right over there is Mexico. And as you can see on the Mexican side, it isn't cleared out, so any migrants could be underneath the brush. On the American side, this part is clear.
We spoke exclusively with Dennis Nixon, the CEO of International Bank of Commerce, whose company built Lago del Rio. Nixon and IBC are just one example of private businesses taking securing the border into their own hands.
For viewers who don't fully understand the implications of the Biden administration's removal of Remain in Mexico, if you are on the other side of the river, if you're where all that brush is, and you manage to cross the river by foot and you make it single-handedly onto land, once you claim asylum, how do we reject someone that claims asylum once they're on that footpath?
Based on Biden's interpretation of the asylum laws, they don't. They just hold up their hands. Border Patrol comes and gets them. They take them to a processing center and then release them. That's been the process, and that's been going on not so much here in Laredo. We don't see as much of it, but up river where our market, we have a big operation, Eagle Pass. Eagle Pass has been basically inundated with people crossing up there constantly. But no, they don't stop them. They just say, I fear for my life. They've been told to say that when they cross. And under the Biden's interpretation of the asylum laws, they say, okay, we're going to process you, but in the meantime, we'll process you here and then release you, and then maybe 3 years or 4 years from now, we'll call you for a hearing. So the people get lost into our country and they never get heard from again. And that's the sad part about this. They're not running. We don't need any walls to protect against that, especially if they're not going to build them on the wall, along the riverbank. How do you build it along the riverbank anyway? You got floods and all kinds of different things. The water comes up sometimes all the way up to a foot or two below this embankment here. So you can't build really a wall on the river because it impedes the flow. So they're building them off the river.
And this is where you can see that visibility matters, the fact that there's less brush on our side, so you can see whether or not there is some migrant trying to climb past the river up into American soil, because there has been a big issue under the Biden administration of fatalities of people crossing. Obviously, this is a narrow stretch.
Somebody can drown. I mean, you get caught in a current, or you're not a good swimmer. Maybe you've got your clothes on and you don't anticipate the weight of your clothing on you, and you get caught up in a situation where you can't swim effectively, you drown. So we have had a lot of drownings up and down the river because of that. People don't anticipate that they have some spaces here where the river is very deep, and they may walk, they think they're fine because they're walking up to their chest, and then all of a sudden they drop into a pit or something and they drown. So it's a sad situation all the way around. Mismanaged totally, and that's the problem.
And I know that you've written about some common sense border proposals, ways to staunch the flow, and something that I've read a lot in your writings is about the economic incentive right now. You see human traffickers on TikTok promising to take people across the Darien Gap, and then without Remain in Mexico, all you need to do is get 1 foot on American soil. One of the issues is that you can't currently apply for asylum in America in your home country. Do you think that there's an economic interest in changing that?
Absolutely, and I've written about that in my Common Sense paper. I've said that I think we should require them to apply through our consular offices or through our embassy in the country they're in, and do the first test, I guess, in terms of whether you have a claim that's legitimate enough to warrant even proceeding with asylum. So then if there was a possibility that you would be cleared for asylum treatment, then you do the other things. But we have so many of these people that everybody admits that 97% or 98% of them are going to be denied. And then they pay all this money for the cartels to come up here, and then if we don't send them back, then they get in the country and we can't deal with them. So if we sent them back immediately, said the only way you can apply is through the consular office or the embassy in your country, or maybe the country right next if there's some kind of an issue of fear. But we have consular offices all over the world, and so there's no reason why people can't use that facility. Now, the State Department doesn't want to do that because they don't want to have to staff it. So you have to have a separate appropriations to create staffing for it, and maybe you have to expand some facilities in various areas of the world to be able to handle the traffic. But I think if you keep them there, then they stay out of the reach of the cartels. They don't waste all this money coming up here and all the hazards of that travel. They're safer and they're protected, and therefore they have a legitimate claim. It gets processed. If they don't, then they're denied and they have to stay.
But Mr. Nixon is also a rancher. He owns this 5,000-acre property here in Laredo, Texas. The border of this ranch falls just 3 miles away from the Rio Grande River, the site of the unprecedented migrant border crisis brought since the start of the Biden-Harris administration.
The U.S.-Mexico border is the epicenter of a record-shattering influx of at least 10 million illegal migrants who have entered the country since President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris took office. By the time we visit Laredo, the success of Operation Lone Star, Governor Greg Abbott's military operation to combat the border crisis, is visibly vindicated. Border crossings in the Laredo sector are down 74% from 2021, while in the San Diego sector, they remain twice as high as they were 3 years ago. But OLS hasn't come without its costs.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the real conflict became is when they had to draw CBP people off of the bridges and processing commercial traffic to go process immigrants. Then that became really a crisis point because they actually closed bridges down. They closed some of the Eagle Pass. And those people that were those businesses that were trying to cross their cargo had to go downriver or upriver to Acuna or downriver to Laredo or another port and completely change their patterns because they couldn't get across the bridge anymore. So that was a very scary time for us because of the fact that that was completely disrupting trade. So that's why we got into a very panicky situation about how could you possibly be closing down these ports of entry. But they had no choice because they were so much of the demands of processing so many illegals coming across, especially the Eagle Pass, which was one of the center points of all these problems. They were coming across in mass, and they were pulling all these people out even from Laredo to go up there to process and handle these people.
We're about to take this helicopter here, once a part of the U.S. Army fleet, 500 feet above the beating heart of the current border crisis. We're about to look above Laredo from north to south. We are flying 500 feet above the city of Laredo, Texas, epicenter of the Biden-Harris border crisis.
They have some of these centers up and down the border where as the migrant surges were happening in Eagle Pass and Del Rio or in the Rio Grande Valley, they would consolidate the migrants and process them, and then the NGOs would take over from that.
Jerry Schwabel runs some of the international relations for the bank, for the businesses that are both here on the American side of the border and across the Rio Grande. But he's also the one flying this helicopter. A Korean War veteran, he's been flying for 50 years.
I go back to 1975. I was flying these babies up in South Korea, and I loved it. It brings back a lot of good memories.
Laredo only has 250,000 people, but millions of square feet of warehouses and container parks sprawl across the American banks of the Rio Grande, as far as we can see.
We got over 40 million square feet that are up, and we're probably going to have, within the next 5 to 10 years, about that much really up, coming up. So this is growth. This is economic vitality. It's growth for the whole North American region, and we're just fortunate to be in a key strategic location for that.
Technology alone cannot compensate for the dramatic demand for commercial trade across the border. Since NAFTA went into effect in 1994, trade between Texas and Mexico has increased by more than 700%, including 60% just since the USMCA took effect.
Below us, you will see the World Trade Bridge, the single largest conveyor of landborne commercial trade into and out of the United States.
And look at actually from the air, the bridge operations, both the Columbia Bridge and the Solidarity Bridge, and looking at the lines trying to get into the United States and deliver those products basically to warehouses and distribution centers in Texas, Nebraska, North Carolina, Ohio, everywhere, California. And that's jobs. That line itself will run about 5 or 6 kilometers into Mexico. So if you imagine each one of those trucks processing, taking anywhere between, on a good day to non-intrusive inspections, a minute, and multiply that times 1,000 trucks, okay? And you do the math, that's how long it's taken to cross. It's sitting there crossing. And then they're perishables, or they're, like I said, they're products that need to get to a factory because it's just going to be in the delivery for the finish the manufacturing process, then that complicates matters. These are the future projects.
Schwebel's idea to fix the problem? The World Trade Bridge project, adding 2 lanes to the existing bridge and a brand new 8-lane bridge for southbound traffic. An estimated $45 to $50 million investment for 18 total lanes to ease transportation times.
Optimize road, and that's the planning that we have to constantly be doing.
IBC wants the U.S. to work with Mexico and utilize Port Laredo's strategic location as a supply chain hub. The building of the new bridge, 4-5, which is located 13 miles south of Laredo. Right now, Mexico is building out the MEX 2. IBC wants the U.S. government to build out Loop 20 around Bridge 4-5, creating the first bi-national loop. But none of this was included in Biden's so-called infrastructure plan.
We need to build our infrastructure the right way, not just build it, but build it the right way.
But this is not just for us down here in Port Laredo. This is for the whole North American continent. That's what people need to understand, that we all play a role that's going to benefit to create jobs in the United States and create jobs in Mexico, create jobs in Canada. And if everybody has a good job, they don't have to move anywhere. They can work where they're at, and have a good, lively, experience and quality of life experience.
The border crisis, from the fentanyl influx to migrant smuggling, still obstructs the grand friend-shoring experiment from reaching either its diplomatic or economic potential.
There's so much money in this, and the thing that frustrates me is that the U.S. side seems to think that this is disorganized. It's not disorganized. That's why they call it organized crime. These people are very organized. They're very good at what they do. They adapt, they change, they move their processes around, determining how they're going to do things and where the soft points are, and they're going to continue to do that. So the issue becomes a constant challenge between the two parties and who can beat the other at the game. The Mexican cartels are being paid a lot of money. Who do you think is going to win? It's all about the money. I keep saying, you don't understand that you're providing a mechanism for the cartels to make money because of the way we operate. I have preached and preached and preached that we should have immigration and asylum reform, that the problem on the border is not on the border, it's in Washington, D.C., because they continue to fail to provide a law that can be enforced and used to not only meet our workforce needs, but to control our borders.
Stephen Moore, you were one of the original architects of the Trump tax cuts, and you are currently an advisor to the former president's campaign. So going forward with his future trade relationships, he's talked a big talk about these universal tariffs. But as we've seen, the relationship with Mexico is incredibly important, and it was further strengthened under USMCA, which he helped negotiate. What do you foresee in a second term, and what do you think he's interested in?
Well, I think one of the things we learned on this trip and going to the border and seeing what's happening in terms of both the migration of people, but also the migration of goods, is how incredibly impactful trade with Mexico is. Americans underappreciate how important both NAFTA and free trade, the new free trade agreement was. And it's critical for jobs, it's critical for our GDP, and it doesn't subtract from people's ability to find jobs. I think it actually improves the overall economy and creates good jobs. So I would advise Trump to go after our enemies and adversaries. That would be China and Russia. But when it comes to some of our most important partners and allies like Mexico, let's trade with them.
And what was fascinating to me is that even before COVID, it looked like our trade with China was actually decreasing in absolute terms. And could trade with Mexico help offset some of those losses?
It's a great point. I mean, most people don't know that we do more trade with Mexico than we do with China. I think most people don't know that. It's also so critical that we, in terms of our foreign policy, that we want to make sure that that Mexico remains politically stable and doesn't move to the left the way sort of Argentina and Venezuela have in recent decades. Trade with Mexico, I think, is both a important economic objective, but also an objective for our foreign policy and our national security.
We've seen at least 10 million illegal migrants cross into the country under the Biden-Harris administration. President Trump's day one priority would be to reverse all of the Biden border policies.
Yes.
Hopes that he wants to carry out the largest deportation strategy in history. In what way does the illegal migrant crisis impact our current economic growth, which is slowing in recent years, and how would resolving it influence future growth?
I think what's so sad about Joe Biden is he's so contaminated our immigration system by just letting anybody come in that Americans have reacted hostilely to that. I mean, we believe in the rule of law. I think most Americans would agree that immigrants are good for our society and our economy, but not if they're coming in. We don't know who they are, as Trump would say, whether they might be criminals, they might be terrorists, they might be people who we can't take care of everybody in the world.
They're not sending their best.
Right.
At all
And so what we need to do, and I think Trump agrees with this, is let's get control of the border. I'm not a big fan of mass deportation. I think those who have committed crimes or gone on welfare here that are not contributing to our society, I think we need to deport them, but not people who are working. But the most important thing is, as you just said, we've got to get back a secure border, not a closed border, but a secure border.
Kamala, our great border czar, who's the worst in history.
But now with a new administration coming into the White House, who prioritizes the border,
We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country.
one can only hope national security and international trade can change for the better and thrive.